What does that mean?
You get those figures.
Ian Bleasdale, Casualty's made you very good friends, hasn't it?
When you're working away as much as we do, it is hard. I've got family, Julia's got family, I miss home. I know Julia desperately misses David and Hannah. Julia, being Julia, will always find time. He's never too busy to listen, to help, and to give advice, and for that, I'm very grateful.
And Bleasdale, having offered to make me supper tonight, there's been this whole thing all week that we were going to get supper tonight cooked by Mr. Ian Bleasdale. And I would like to announce here that I'd like him to promise that I still get that supper.
You'll shut up for a minute, yes?
Derek Thompson, on screen, Charlie Fairhead's relationship with Baz has been fairly explosive. Do you have a say in the outcome?
I think it was a game away, wouldn't it? Not really. No. The answer is no.
And there's nothing you can tell us about what's going to happen.
Have they had the chainsaw bit yet?
No, we're not allowed to tell you. They have to keep watching, and then they'll find out.
Thank you very much. Well, Julia Watson, this is your life. You were born in Llangonwyd in mid-Glamorganshire. Your mother and father, Don and Enid, lived in Westbourne Park in Derby, where your dad worked as an engineer for Rolls-Royce and later as a lecturer at Derby College of Technology. But your mother went back to her parents' house in Wales to have you. There you are, centre stage at your christening at St Peter's Church, Nantlle Ffatlon. And the family is here tonight with your younger brother Hugh, your parents Don and Enid. Don, Julia's arrival gave you a bit of a scare, didn't it?
Yes, Enid went down home to Wales about 6 weeks before the baby was due. And I normally went down on the weekend catching the 5 o'clock from Derby, which got me into the village about 10:30. But that particular night, I missed the 5 o'clock, which meant I had to travel all night. Spent most of it on Gloucester Station, I remember. I arrived in the village and was walking up the hill to the house when an ambulance came down the road and stopped, and the chap said to me, "Where's 47? Well, since that was Enid's home, I began to panic a bit. So we finally got back to the house, and the panic was still raging in the house as well. In fact, the only calm person there was my wife, who was in labour at the time. But then Julia was born at 11 o'clock.
All a bit prophetic, really, wasn't it? At the age of 5, you go to Reigate Primary School in Derby, and Enid, Julia soon got involved in the school plays.
Yes, she did. When she was 10, she performed in the school pantomime Beauty and the Beast, and guess who was the Beast? But she showed great presence of mind when one of the young actors in a scene died. And Julia used the stage to great advantage. She wandered around to take attention away from this young lass.
Well, there you are, as the babbling beast. Not really very beastly in that picture. Very well. Well, you pass your 11 plus and you go to Parkfield Cedars, a girls' grammar school in Derby. In your last year at Parkfields, you become head girl. In March 1970... Yes. Are you glad I reminded you of that?
What ammunition!
Yeah. Now, in March 1970, still at school, you played Juliet in the Shakespeare Society's production of Romeo and Juliet at the Derby Playhouse. Now, Hugh, you were 12 at the time, and you helped your sister rehearse at home.
Yes, we rehearsed lines for weeks, and Julia played Juliet, obviously, and I played every other part from Romeo to the nurse. So by the end, I was probably the only 12-year-old around who actually knew the entire script off by heart.
There you are in the balcony scene with Romeo. You haven't seen your leading man for 25 years, but list what light through yonder window breaks. 'Tis Romeo, who now runs a publishing company in Kent. Paul Carpenter. So, Paul, a lot of water has run under the balcony since that time.
Yes, but I have very happy memories. Julia was a smashing Juliet. The audiences loved her, and she had great reviews. But I do remember one evening where she showed her improvisation skills and made a quick change to Shakespeare's plot. Now, Romeo, of course, takes poison to kill himself, and Juliet finds the body, grumbles there's no poison for her, and then takes a dagger from Romeo's belt and kills herself. One evening, there's no dagger. No problem at all for Julia. She just changes the words, takes my sword, and kills herself with that. Obviously a very early talent. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Your parents used to take you and Hugh to the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre in Stratford-on-Avon. Before university, you decided to take a year off, and you spend it as a tour guide at Anne Hathaway's cottage and selling programmes at the theatre. And in 1972, you go up to Exeter University to read English and drama. A highlight of the drama course was the improvisation class.
It's hard to play a fried egg, but you certainly cracked it.
Your best friend at Exeter, later with TV's Play School, Sheila Gilby. Okay, Sheila, tell us about Exeter.
Well, we did do some very creative things at Exeter, and I think Julia will probably remember some of the improvisations. I mean, we did go down the local pet shop, and I studied the parrot for quite a few days, but Julia chose to go to some quiet fields and watch the cows, and she made a wonderful Jersey cow. Very good at it. And we also had to study inanimate objects, and I think you can probably remember us on the floor of the Washington Singer building in our black tights and leotards, bobbing up and down, being a sausage and an egg. And she was a sizzling sausage, and she's gone on to great things.
Absolutely. It's been very useful in my professional career. Yes, I can see it.
Oh, thanks. Thank you very much. In your second year at university, you and Sheila shared a flat. It was unfurnished, and Don, you helped fill in the gaps.
Yes, Julia rang me with great excitement one evening to say she'd bought a dining table for 40p. So I put a £1 note in the envelope with a little note saying, here's £1, use the change to buy the dining chairs.
In 1975, after university, you get your first acting job with a community theatre company in Newcastle called The Brothers.
And you certainly got our audiences all fired up.
Some of the brothers and a sister from that group, Paddy Macefield, Phil Clark, Peter Thompson, and Emmerdale's Jane Cox. Paddy, some warm memories then?
Yes, the company performed mainly in those days to working men's clubs, whose audiences could be quite demanding. And so to keep them in order, Julia would present a fire-eating act, while the rest of the company put up the scenery and props.
What you're very kindly not remembering is that we were a community theatre company, and as performers, you have to be very versatile. You have to be able to sing, dance, play an instrument, none of which I can do. So I felt a rather useless member of the company, and I happened to meet this fire-eating stripper in Newcastle who offered to teach me to strip and to fire-eat, and I said, well, hold the stripping. But I felt I had to learn to fire-eat to help out the group.
That's right, Joe. Do you remember when I jumped out from behind that sort of little rickety screen, dressed as a granny singing Great Balls of Fire, with you running fire up and down your arms?
I wish I'd seen that. Thank you all very much. We do have a photograph of you doing that fire-eating act. Do you still do it?
No. She says very fast.
Was it painful?
You could burn the inside of your mouth if you weren't careful.
If you breathed in?
Yes. I did actually teach somebody once who then told me sometime afterwards that he'd been in hospital for 3 months because he'd coughed at the wrong time. So it's not something to try at home.
No, he's not carrying a torch for you.
The old jokes are the best, yeah.
Well, in 1976, you blaze a trail to the Nottingham Playhouse. 2 years later, you're in Basingstoke for roles in Cabaret and She Stoops to Conquer, directed by your friend Guy Slater. Your first big break in television came in 1980 when you appeared in the hit comedy series Never the Twain as the daughter of a crusty antique dealer.
Crusty or not, you were more like a real daughter to me.
It must be, it is, Windsor Davis. Windsor, apart from being Welsh, what makes Julia perfect?
Well, just look at her. Beautiful. Well, as a matter of fact, we had a lot of fun on that show, and we were a small cast and everybody got on well. But apart from all the fun we had, this one cares about people as well. She's a great kid, sparing your blushes. I remember once I had a virus of some kind and I was feeling dog rough. She nursed me all through the day with coffee and God knows what. But the lovely thing I remember about that day, we were getting our gear on to actually do the show, and they gave me a seersucker jacket, light blue, you know, and you said to me, oh, you said, you look fantastic in that. You should always wear blue. So from then on, that's me, kid. In honor of Julia.
But it's your eyes.
Oh, here you are, see. Out of their clock. They are been working.
Thank you, Windsor.
God bless you. Thank you.
In 1983, you star at the National Theatre in Danton's Death and Major Barbara. In 1985, you play Kate Hardcastle in She Stoops to Conquer. And one of your co-stars from that play at the National is here tonight, the lovely Dora Bryan.
No.
Now, during the interval, you used to pop into Julia's dressing room for a cup of coffee, didn't you?
Well, I was terrified of the National Theatre. I still am. And, but I did used to do tapestry in the intervals, do you remember? And the only dressing room I knew was Julia's, so I used to do my tapestry in there. And one night I stitched the tapestry to this beautiful, wasn't it a lovely dress? It was a lovely dress, Michael.
Yes.
A lovely. Fancy seeing you again so soon. Anyway, I stitched this tapestry to this beautiful rose pink dress. It's probably still there at the National, with all the holes in it. And we had to uncut the tapestry from the dress before I went on the stage.
We did a lot of touring with She Stoops. And obviously between the matinee and the evening performances, you'd want to go out and get something to eat.
Yes.
So we'd all carefully unpin, take our big wigs off and put, you know, and all our hair would be in pin curls and we'd put scarves over our head. And you'd go to M&S to buy a sandwich or something and I'd bump into Dora in full wig. She had these huge wigs. And nobody ever said anything. You have these bars.
Do you remember that snack bar near the theatre in Bath? You walked in this wig. I said, I'll have one of those, and one of those, and one of those. Still in the wig. Nobody took the blindest bit of notice of me.
That big hole in your dress they were looking at.
I got a hole by this time. It had been mended. They're very good at the National.
Well, thank you very much. That was lovely. In 1986, you're chosen to play the ambitious, fun-loving young medic, Dr. Baz Samuels, in the very first series of Casualty. Charge nurse Charlie Fairhead loses his heart to you, and you seem to be destined to be together. Then you walk out of his life.
I did what had to be done because it was the right thing for me to do. Not you, not anybody else. Me!
I would have married you. Made a home for us.
That's why I didn't tell you. I might have been tempted and it would have been just as wrong.
I'll never understand you.
No. I don't suppose you ever will.
In the winter of 1988, you go up to Cumbria to make a TV film called Across the Lake. And David, it was about that time that you and Julia met.
It was just before then that we met, but I went up to Cumbria to be with Julia while the film was being made. And we did some fell walking on Julia's days off. And there was one occasion on which we went up this mountain and got quite a long way up, and the fog came down, and there was lashing rain. We couldn't really see each other, at all, fumbling around in the fog. And it was quite dangerous. I mean, we could have got lost and things could have been nasty, found our bleached bones on the side of the fell. So we decided to go back to the car, and I said, here we go, back to the car this way. And I led off, and because it was perhaps a new relationship, and because I was the guy with the gaiters and the boots, and Julia followed, but she only followed for a brief time. And then she said, no, we're going the wrong way. The car is in fact on the other side of the fell. And I sort of gave an airy laugh and thought, well, I'll let her make a fool of herself. And then, And indeed, we went over the top of the fell, down the other side. And sure enough, when we got beneath the fog, there in a car park about a mile away, as the crow flew, was Julia's car. And she didn't really sort of say much. She just sort of looked at me and walked on. But since then, I've always accepted unquestioningly what she said.
Would it were true.
Well, you did what you were told, and you and Julia got married at Fulham Register Office on the 22nd of July, 1989. The following year, Julia, you're appearing at the Vaudeville Theatre in the Russian play Exchange when someone close to you makes an interesting discovery.
It was elementary, my dear Watson.
Starring with you in that play, Martin Jarvis and his wife, Rosalind Ayres. Martin, so you put two and two together?
Yes, and sort of made five, Michael. You may remember, Ros played my wife in the play, and Julia, you were my mistress.
I was.
In the play, I mean, yes. And, of course, there were lots of scenes. Do you remember this, where we had to do a little bit of a clinch and a little bit of an embrace? And has Julia been eating too many biscuits or something? Because I can hardly get my arms around her. And, of course, Ros replied...
Well, I gave my expert diagnosis and said, well, it's probably just something like water retention, Anyway, we found out that Julia had gone to the wardrobe mistress and asked if she could possibly...
Secretly?
Yes, let out the waistlines of all her costumes. Well, this was a clue that even I couldn't miss. So it was obviously a case of congratulations.
And you're a wonderful actress, and we knew that you had it in you.
Thank you very
There
much.
she is to prove it.
Try it again.
And the reason for the expanding waistline arrived safely on September the 17th, baby Hannah. The following year, you go off on a tour of the Far East, performing Shakespeare for students. Sounds fascinating, but it wasn't an easy job.
The big problem, as always, was shortage of staff.
And he should know, Dr. Finlay himself, David Rintoul, and with him his partner, Vivian Heilbronn. David, you and Vivian ran that tour to Malaysia, and doing Shakespeare proved a bit of a challenge there.
Well, we're doing the whole of Midsummer Night's Dream with 5 actors. So Julia played Hippolyta and Snug and Quince on the first fairy, and Tort as well.
It was one of the best and most exciting jobs, and this was the second tour I'd done with Julia, and I would love to do it for the 3rd time. She's a great actress and a wonderful teacher.
Thank you very much. In 1995, you returned to Casualty, and you've been a much-loved regular ever since. But just checking your file notes, I see we have a final consultation from someone who is well qualified. He was another favourite from Casualty, who went on to star in the sitcom Blooming Marvellous. And he is here for you tonight, Holby's Dr. Mike Barrett, Clive Mantle. Clive, you can dispense the last word.
Well, it is a great pleasure to work with Julia for all the reasons we've already heard, but not only those, she's a very good actress. She's witty, she's intelligent, she's a very trusted colleague, but most importantly, at 7:30 every morning when we turn up at the warehouse to where we make Casualty, she's to be found holding court around the coffee and dispensing the gossip that she's just learnt firsthand from the makeup department, which we then spread around the rest of the building. But more importantly than that, you have a smile on your face from the beginning to the end of the day, and that's really the most important thing. So on behalf of all the cast and crew in Bristol, those who have worked on the series and those that are, I on all their behalves, thank you for everything that you have done for the series that means so much to us.
Julia Watson, this is your life.
There are some mornings.
Barry! Just passing. See ya. Let's might take you all, you zombie!
When it would be safer to stay in bed.
What do you want to for?
I've got this woman. Pregnant.
My name is Rick. The kids at the youth club call me Rick the Vic.
Only in this madhouse. Roger.
Thursday at 9:30 on BBC One.
What line of business in then? I own a minicab firm.
He said to me, I'll show you what an awkward neighbour can be like.
The battle lines are drawn.
We could end up with thousands of pounds worth of solicitors' costs trying to defend a 16-foot strip of land.
And neither side is giving ground. Neighbours at War, tonight, 9:30 on BBC One.
We had literally to break a court order to go and feed the rabbit.
Well, it's a 3-way bet as to who plays Queen Victoria, but you've got to fancy Dot. She'd look lovely in a tiara. EastEnders is in half an hour. Taking the nation's pulse first on BBC One, Watchdog Health Check with Alice Beer.